This cult has intergenerational families connecting the human brain to artificial intelligence, which they're openly talking about. They're psychopaths, so they act like psychopaths. People are going to lose their homes, they're going to lose their businesses.
Most of the globe is under a capitalist system.
No, it's not. It's under a cartelist system, because the people who control the governments are the same people that control the banks. Abraham Lincoln, the greenbacks, bang. President Kennedy, the silver certificate, bang. The worst nightmare of the banking system is interest-free money, where in the end, your money would be connected to your body.
David, what's your big warning to humanity?
You, your kids and grandkids are going to be living in a global fascist dictatorship of total 24-hour surveillance control.
So this could be the most revealing, shocking David Icke interview the world has ever seen. So I'm Rob Moore, host of the Disruptive Entrepreneur Show. David Icke is probably one of the world's most renowned conspiracy theorists. Exposure of governmental truths. Also, renegade social commentator. Disclaimer, and I don't usually disclaim my videos, this is important. I do not, we do not, my companies do not endorse anything here that David Icke shares. David is exercising his freedom of speech. He went down some very controversial rabbit holes. Do your own research. We asked him about the financial system, who runs the world, capitalism. Actually, David calls it cartelism. David also talks about Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, the billionaires, the big social media platforms, and the Hunger Games society that he thinks we are in. So some major revelations coming in this interview, but first, make sure you like this video, turn the notification bell on, and subscribe to the channel. David, thanks a lot for being a guest again on the show. Really grateful to you. I wanted to talk maybe more specifically this time round on money and the money system. There's obviously a lot of changes going on to the money system, the taxation. Who do you think, David, controls the financial system, and how does the financial system work?
It all comes down in the end, in terms of these society controlling institutions, to what I call the global cult, which is a global network of secret societies and semi-secret groups with ultimately, if you go deep enough in the rabbit hole, a mission control, a central organizational center. This explains why countries tend to respond to the same kind of situations in extraordinarily the same way. The thing is, if you're talking about control and the need to control, then you look at society as it's structured, and control is overwhelmingly dictated by money. Who has it and who doesn't? And if you look at a definition of freedom, well, it's choice. The more choices you can make, the freer you are. The fewer choices you can make, the less free you are. And in the way that society is structured today, what dictates choice more than anything than money? Who has it and who doesn't? So I hear people talk about how the billionaires and the billionaire corporations, etc., are all about money. But, well, yes, on one level, they have a mentality that is it has an insatiable greed. But the bottom line of bottom lines is not about accumulation of money. It's accumulation of control via the weapon of money. And when you look at how this cult, in all its different expressions, brought in the money system to what it is today, it's founded on creating money out of nothing called credit and charging interest on it. you go into a bank and you say borrow £100,000. Well, in theory, well, the bank doesn't do anything in terms of moving precious metal around or any of this stuff. It puts into your account £100,000 called credit that has never, does not, and will never exist except in theory. And then it says, for doing that, we're going to charge you interest. And if you don't pay back the principal and the interest on credit, then we are going to take your wealth that does exist, your house, your business, your land, whatever. And if you look at this creation of money, even in theory, when you go to a bank and you get a loan, you will borrow £100,000 in theory, and they will put £100,000 into your account. But you're not paying back £100,000. You're paying back £100,000 plus interest. The interest is never created, only the principal, even in this theoretical way. And thus, by design, not accident, there is never at any point enough units of exchange, money, in whatever form it takes, in circulation to pay back all the principal on the debt outstanding and all the interest on the debt outstanding. So absolutely included in the way it's structured is that people are going to lose their homes, they're going to lose their businesses because there's not enough money in circulation to pay back all the debt and all the interest on the debt. Now, when you have an expansion of the money supply and you have what we call a boom, what that means is, of course, that there's lots of money, theoretical, etc., in circulation. So there's more to spend on things. So companies need to make more things and provide more services because of the demand. And with that expansion, you can hide in the Peter pays Paul method the fact that there's not enough money in circulation to pay back all the interest on the debt and all the principal. But when, and this is done systematically by that which is behind the banking system, they start withdrawing money from circulation, like in 2008, the credit crunch. They just stopped giving out loans of money that only existed in theory, called credit crunch. People couldn't service their debt. They couldn't pay back their bills. And thus it becomes painfully obvious in a recession, in a downturn, that there's not enough money in circulation to pay back all the interest and all the principal on the debt. And so this is a process that's gone on since this form of banking started, where you expand the economy. And what happens in that time, people take out more loans. They get more confident. They maybe expand their business because of demand. They maybe buy a bigger house. They maybe have 2 holidays a year instead of 1, and so on. These are the good times. But what's happening there from the banking system point of view, that the whole, is the fishing line is going out. And then they start taking money out of circulation. So there's not enough, as there was before, to buy the things that generated the boom, that generated the need to loan more money to meet the demand of the boom. And the fishing line then goes back in. And what's happening is in this process all the way through is that there has been a constant exchange through this boom bust cycle of real wealth in exchange for fresh air money called credit. And this is a massive, massive foundation reason why we talk today about the 1%. when you have literally a handful of people who have equivalent wealth to the poorest half of the global population. And it's not based on reality. It's based on this manipulating of the money system. Where they want to go with the cryptocurrency is turn it into a one world currency, where in the end your money would be connected to your body.
Two things that have come up from that, David, and I'll ask them both together and just take it wherever you'd like. Number one is, who is this cult that controls this money system? Why do they want this control using this money system? So
well, let me answer the first one first of all. Why does a psychopath do what they do? Why does a serial killer do what they do? Why do psychopaths act like they do? And the answer is because they're psychopaths. So what we're dealing here with are psychopaths, in fact, super psychopaths. Super psychopaths that have, as psychopaths have, it's what it is the top trait of a psychopath. They have no empathy. They have no ability to put themselves in the feeling and experiences of those they affect. So anyone who has empathy, it's the fail-safe mechanism of human behavior. If you can feel empathy with the effect you're having on other people, that limits what you're going to do. Because first of all, you're having an emotional consequence for what you're doing. But when you have no empathy, because you're a psychopath, you don't have that emotional consequence. In fact, you get off on people suffering and you posturing your power over them. So, we're dealing with deeply insane people from a consciousness point of view, but intellectually bright enough to understand how the human psyche works and how you can manipulate it. Because when there's a few of you and you want to control billions, you have to do it by manipulating the perceptions of the billions so they act and respond in ways that suit your agenda. You can't, they want to go to this next stage through connecting the human brain to artificial intelligence, which they're openly talking about. But up to this point, they simply don't have the numbers to impose their will upon the population, because not enough of them, even taking into account the law enforcement and the government administration and all this stuff, there's still only a fraction of them compared with the population they want to control and dictate to. So the way they do it, and the COVID era is a classic example of it, is they manipulate the perceptions of the people so they act in ways that suit the agenda. So they're psychopaths, so they act like psychopaths. And in terms of who they are, well, that's a very long story. But I have taken this back to at least to ancient Babylon and Sumer, and you can go back further and into other parts of the world as well. But you can follow a network which you can follow it out of Babylon, you can follow it out of Egypt too, and into Rome, where they became the Roman Empire ultimately. Wherever this network has gone through history, an empire has followed, because that's what they are. They're acquisitive. They wanted global power, and they went in stages expanding that global power. So this cult has intergenerational families which continue on through the generations. So one era, people die, but the next generation comes in to take over, and it's a long plan to get where they pretty much are now, which is global centralization of power. So the Roman Empire, of course, and then this center of this cult moved up into Northern Europe, and massively centered in London. And what we call the City of London is the financial district. which has its own police force, its own government, etc., is a massive global center to this day of this cult, which, of course, as we've discussed already, uses control of finance and money to dictate the choice, thus the freedom or lack of it, of the population. And when they settled their center in Britain, what do we have then? We had the British Empire, and we had these other European empires as well. And what that period of colonialism was this cult going global. And they went off, and what did they say about the British Empire? The sun never set on it. It was so vast, but you had all the other European empires as well: the French, the Belgian, the German, etc., the Dutch, and you're pretty much spanning the world in terms of colonialism. And then we had this massive sleight of hand when it appeared that the colonial powers were rolling back and giving freedom to their former colonies. But that's not what happened. They exchanged overt, in-your-face dictatorship, which overwhelmingly has a finite life. It may take a long time, but it has a finite life because the people under control can see their controllers. The exchange that took place with the apparent colonial rollback went from overt control to covert control. And they left out in these former colonies this secret society network and the families that run it in each country, because this global cult is like it's like a holographic web. One of the great traits of holograms is that every part of the hologram is a smaller part of the whole. And this is how this cult works. It's holographic. You have a global network, and then you have subsidiary networks in each country. And those subsidiary networks have the role of imposing in their sphere of influence the agenda dictated from the center. And that's how you get this situation, as we've seen with the COVID era, of pretty much the same response, identical in so many cases, response to the same situation. And so in each country, these subsidiary networks have the role of controlling that country's government, any political party that has a chance of forming a government, and a lot of the rest as well. Controlling finance, crucial, the banking system, the financial system in that country, which is why the City of London is so important in terms of Britain. Controlling the major corporations, controlling the health pyramid. And so the various subsidiaries in these different countries are running the banking system in those countries in accordance with the centrally dictated agenda. And so you have organizations like the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, which was created by these families, the Rockefellers, etc., where the heads of the various central banks meet regularly to coordinate policy. And it's all centrally dictated, but you have these subsidiaries playing it out in each country. And so then you had the further expansion of this cult's power through what is called globalization. Globalization is what? The centralization of power in every area of our lives. Globalization, we gave it a name eventually, is simply the ongoing centralization of power in the banking system and these other areas of human life that this cult is generating, because it's a simple equation. If the few want more and more control over the many, they have to centralize decision making. If you look at the history of this period I'm talking about, first of all, people were in a tribal situation where the people in the tribe were making the decisions for the tribe. Then lots of the tribes were brought together under what we call nations. Now a few people at the center of the nation are dictating to all that group of tribes that form the nation. And then in the European Union, of course, there's this bringing together of countries under centralized control. Now, all the former tribes of all the former nations are now dictated from Brussels by people who are simply unelected. And although Britain is supposed to have left the European Union, it's still welded to so much of its dictating of the way things operate. And so the next stage, which is where it's been heading all along, I've been writing about this for 30 years, is to create a world government, a world central bank, which will dictate all global finance, a world currency. I've been writing about this, mate, since 1992, 93. That the idea was to create a single global currency and bring an end to cash. And this COVID era, of course, has seen cash plummet even quicker than it was before. And why? Because the cult frontman appointed by Bill Gates, Ted Ross, Director General of the World Health Organization, created by the Rockefellers in 1948, said very early on in the COVID era that you could catch this, quote, virus off money, so better to use cards, etc. And so money plummeted. I mean, I started getting cups of coffee on railway stations from little cabins on the station where you always paid with money, and now they only take card. And so you are looking at this constant centralization of power, and at every stage, fewer people are dictating to more and more. And there's another equation in this, which is that the more you centralize power, the more power you have at the center to centralize even quicker. So it gets faster and faster and faster and faster. And so if you look at the COVID era, basically it's been a period, the last 2 years, 18 months since the first lockdown, a period in which what has been happening in the background, in the shadows, in the peripheral vision, this manipulation, has gone on public display. You, your kids and grandkids are going to be living in a global fascist dictatorship of total 24-hour surveillance control. If you don't want that to happen, get off your frickin' ass.
Hey, it's Rob. I hope you're enjoying the interview so far. Now, unfortunately, we were forced to take out quite a lot of the content. David Icke has been cancelled and booted off most social media channels. I don't want my account shut down, but I've got some good news for you, and this is a brand new first. I have a premium content platform called rob.team, and if you subscribe to that, I'm going to give you access to all the edited out, the full length version of this David Icke discussion. We do rob.team meetups, we have exclusive private content, and the link is in the description below. So now let's get back to the interview with David Icke. Most of the globe is under a capitalist system.
No, it's not. It's under a cartelist system.
Okay, so definitely would love to come to that. The system that we know of, that we think we're under, capitalism, is that the problem, or is the problem how the system is being used? And then could you talk about this cartelist system? That would be interesting.
Yeah, well, no, this is the point. You know, this gets kind of frustrating when you observe the terms that are used. For instance, the woke mentality is called liberal. Oh, I'm sorry, it's the way I tell them. It's the most illiberal mentality you'll ever come across in your life. You know, it's fascism more than liberalism. But then you hear this anti-capitalism, down with capitalism. Well, it would be nice if we had it. What we have is cartelism. If you take an example like Facebook, Facebook, take Amazon, take many of these companies, they are cult companies. They were created with cult money, which was limitless. And so what happens is they are built up to become monopolies. And in their developmental period, they are allowed to lose loads of money. Look at Amazon, for goodness sake, loads of money year after year, phenomenal amounts of money, because they're building a monopoly. And so you then reach the point where you have your near monopoly and you start to make vast amounts of money. And at that point, you can start dictating the odds. This is why suddenly, after we had a free internet, now YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Google, etc., are involved in the most extreme hysterical censorship, which is simply digital book burning that the Nazis engaged in. And what you're doing is you have these companies being built up with CIA money in terms of Facebook, etc. And they are competing against other companies. You could call them genuinely capitalist companies that have entrepreneurs that are using their creativity. But those other companies they're competing with do have to watch the bottom line. They can't go on losing money year on year on year. And so they're under a tremendous disadvantage to these cult companies that have a limitless cash flow until they don't need it anymore because they dominate the market. And then what happens, and we've seen this with Facebook and so many others, is when other companies come along, they just buy them up. When the competition comes along, they buy them up and they take them over. And they basically have no competition in the end, worth the name. And that's cartelism. When you see groups within the same financial area, be they oil companies, be they social media companies, be they banks, whatever, moving as one unit to control the market. That's not capitalism. That's communism. That's centralization of control. And when you have your other cult-created organizations like PayPal and these other groups in the financial area, who then say to people who are competing against cult companies like Facebook or social media, when independent social media entrepreneurial people, proper capitalist people, if you like, start to build up non-censored social media platforms and non-censored video platforms, what happens is these cartel companies like PayPal and other payment companies come in and say, no, we're not going to work with you anymore. So you can't go on operating, because you can't operate without us, because we control this market, this payment market. So you've had it. And then you have the example with Parler, the social media company that came up. Because what they say, you see, this is the con. They say, oh, well, no, Facebook and Twitter, they should have the right to censor what they like because they're private companies. If you want to have no censorship, then start your own. And then you do start your own. And these cartel companies then come in and say, we're going to shut you down. So Amazon just shut Parler down. Because Amazon, people think, oh, Amazon's about ordering goods and they arrive in the post. But no, Amazon have a fantastic breadth of control of what they call the cloud and the whole computer server operation. It's massive, and therefore they can shut you down. And so what we've seen is more and more power in these various expressions of the economy being handed to fewer and fewer people, so they can not only dictate what goes on, they can stop any other genuinely capitalist competition from actually competing with them. And what if we look at lockdown? This is a vital area. What I've been saying and writing now for decades is the plan for what I call the Hunger Games Society. And the Hunger Games Society, I called it something else before, but after the Hunger Games movie trilogy came along, I called it the Hunger Games Society because those movies portrayed what this Hunger Games Society I'm talking about plans to be, which is a tiny few people dictating to everyone else via control of finance and via dependency by the population on the few for the very basics of survival. And I've been writing again for a very, very long time that the plan is and has been to destroy independent income and independent business and force the population to live on what I said was going to be called a guaranteed income, which would be a pittance, and you'd only get it if you do what the government wants you to do. Now that sounded fantastic, when I first started talking about it. But this is why lockdown has been instigated, not to protect health, load of nonsense, but to destroy independent business, independent employment, and independent livelihood. Who has benefited from lockdown? Amazon, Facebook, all these major corporations have phenomenally increased their wealth and market share, while genuine entrepreneurs in the small businesses and the medium businesses and even the bigger businesses that are not cult owned have been sitting in their homes under lockdown. And what they did in this period, it's just ended. We're going to see now the consequences. Is when they started locking people down in Britain in September, the spring of 2020, they knew that this lockdown was going to go on and on and on, but they also knew that if they didn't provide some income for those that were told their work was not essential and therefore couldn't be done, then they were going to get massive pushback right from the start because people were not going to be able to pay their bills and buy food for their families. So they introduced furlough. And furlough was simply, I said it at the time, buying silence and buying time for more and more businesses to be destroyed, more and more employment to be destroyed, independent employment, independent businesses. And eventually I said, what they're going to do is they're going to pull the furlough payment, and then you're going to see the consequences and you're going to see actually what's gone on. And I compared it to a similar situation with Margaret Thatcher and the miners. What Margaret Thatcher did was pay the miners bonus money to produce as much coal as they possibly could. It didn't have to be coal that was needed, just produce as much coal as you can. And the coal stocks got higher and higher and higher because far more was being produced than was being used. And then what did she do? She started closing the pit. And the miners, she knew, and those controlling her knew, would go on strike. But the lights were not going to go out as they did under Ted Heath because the stocks were so high. And they went a year, and the stocks still held out, and they had to march back with their heads bowed, and the mining industry was over. This is how this is what the furlough's been about. And what we know is a very simple thing. Know the outcome and you'll see the journey. If you know where it's meant to go, you'll see the stepping stones to it every day. If you don't, everything seems random. So if you know the journey is to destroy independent business and independent employment with those businesses, then you know that lockdown's coming back because they haven't completed the destruction of it yet. And you look at suddenly this crisis in terms of fuel shortages. And yes, because of that, food shortages and other reasons. And all these things that are happening now, they are continuing the impact of lockdown, even though we're not in it. Because people are desperately trying to run their businesses and get the work done, but under the problem of distribution and fuel. And the I know this from my own books that get sent around the world. The container shipping industry, which business, of course, depends upon, is in bloody chaos. And what is happening? Because of it, the prices are going through the roof. The prices of fuel is going up. The price of energy is going up. This is the big squeeze to push people into the lower echelons of the Hunger Games society, so they become dependent on the state for the basics of survival. And dependency equals control. All these things, all these dots connect if you know where we're being taken.
Do you think you're controversial?
I hope so. If you're not controversial in a world that's utterly insane, then it's time to find a mirror and ask why. Because when an insane world says that Ike is insane, I punch the air and say thank you very much, very kind of you. Because if this insane world thought I was sane, then I'd have a real problem.
Why do you do what you do? Why are you so committed for much of your life's work to bring out this information? Which is linked to my question number 2 is, then what's the solution to all of this? Is it utopic and a dream fantasy to say we can have equality? If they've got the control, do we just bow to it, and how do we change it?
Well, do we just bow to it? Well, talking personally, that will be the bloody day. Why do I do it? Well, I started, for various things happened to me. In the period of 1989, 1990. And I set on a journey from an understanding that the forces that appeared to be controlling the world, like governments and prime ministers and presidents, actually weren't. The real power was in the shadows where you never saw it. So I went on this journey of uncovering it, and to uncover not only that the power is in the unseen, but what that power is seeking to do in terms of where it wants to take humanity. Now, because you're dealing with psychopaths who have no empathy and no limits, where they want to take humanity is truly, truly horrific. And I saw this from the early 1990s. And if you're a father, if you're a grandfather, and no, if you're a human being that just cares about freedom and justice and fairness, and you look at little kids, and you see that what those kids, or the world, the society that those kids are going to live in virtually all their lives, if we don't head this off, which I could see. I mean, at the time, of course, people were laughing that it's all a load of rubbish, that Ike. But I knew it was true. And that's why I kept going, despite all the ridicule and all the abuse, because I knew where it was going. And so I looked at these kids, and I looked at my own children, and I saw the world that was planned for them. And, if you have a smear of decency, then what you do then is you give the rest of your life to trying to head it off and to alert people to it, so that they can put an end to it. Which brings me to the second question, which is, how do we bring an end to it? Well, people say, what's the solution? Well, I'm not interested in solutions. I'm interested in removing the cause of the problem, because that is the solution. You can constantly look for solutions to a problem. And what solutions normally do, see politics, is lead to more and more problems, which need more and more solutions, which lead to more problems. If you're going to break the cycle, then you have to remove the cause of the problem. And if you remove the cause of the problem must disappear because its cause is gone. And the problem, and you look right the way through human history, the problem with humanity, which is why the few have always controlled the many. I don't care what the culture is. I don't care what the historical era is. It's the same. Is because the many give their power to the few in the form of acquiescence. And that is how the few have always controlled the many. And if we didn't do that, the few have no power over us. So if someone comes out of Downing Street or the White House and says, we've had a discussion, they do it all the time these days, and this is what's going to happen. If enough of the population say, we're not doing that, then they have no power. There's not enough of them to impose it.
In this world of increasing globalization and centralization of power, how does one remain or become independently wealthy and free?
Well, the idea is you don't. That's the point. The only way that you can do that is to stop cooperating with that wishes to stop you doing it. And that means independent businesses en masse refusing to cooperate with the next lockdown. See, what they've done, this is an interesting thing, what the British government have done, because they're a bunch of liars, bunch of psychopaths. And you look at the what's called the hair test, named after the man who devised it, the hair test of psychopathic traits. And you look at governments around the world and these health professionals that are running the response, and they fulfill every criteria of a psychopath. And so one of the traits of a psychopath is that you will lie as much as is necessary to get what you want. You have no compulsion about lying. The question is, do the lies get me what I want? Okay, well, that's not a problem then. So they announced, you remember, in September through this, see above, Naheem Zahawi, who was then vaccine minister. He is tragically education secretary now, that they were going to introduce vaccine passports at the end of September. And he announced it in the House of Commons, so it was official. And about 2 days later, the government went back on that. And they said, we're not. But we do have a plan B just in case. Now, of course, the bloody liars, the plan B is plan A. It's masks and it's a vaccine passports and all this stuff. But what they've done when they announced this, because of course you well know, what they do is they'll announce something, actually usually not openly like that. They'll usually announce it through the media, sources say, and they're watching the reaction, see if they could get away with it. And if they don't think they can get away with it, and they've done sources say leaks, then they say, oh, no, we were never going to do that. Or the classic line, there are no plans to do that at this time. So they'd made a decision after that Zahawi announcement. They didn't think they were going to get away with this without one hell of a fight at the end of September. So they went back on it. But what they did is said, we've got a plan B. They just put it on the government website what that plan B is. And it's vaccine passports. It's all of it. Vaccine passports are being globally centrally coordinated. That's why Israel has them and all these other people have them. All these other countries have them. But there's more pushback in Britain. It's more difficult for them here than in many countries. So they know this, that a lot of people are going to die through this winter and onwards. It's all a psychological operation. And so many people have fallen for it. And some of us haven't. And some of us are not going to cooperate under any circumstances. And you can't intimidate us into doing so. The people who control the governments are the same people that control the banks. And so laws have been passed to suit the banks. The worst nightmare of the banking system is interest-free money, because that takes their power away at source.
Is the taxation system at the moment, David, fair? And do you think there's going to be a tax grab for a long time after this to pay for it?
Do we need taxation? People say, "Oh yeah, of course," because that's the mentality. Oh, taxation, taxation, pay for everything. Well, why are governments all over the world borrowing money from private banks? They're the bloody government. Why aren't they creating their own currency interest-free and circulating it interest-free within the population? Why aren't they creating money in this way, which is what the banks are doing, except the banks are charging interest as well, and paying for public projects? Why do they have to borrow money at interest, taxpayer interest, from private corporations and banks and other institutions to pay for these projects? Why aren't they creating their own money interest-free and paying for them that way? Because the people who control the governments are the same people that control the banks. And so laws have been passed to suit the banks. And, you look at people around the world, politicians, who have started the process of introducing interest-free money issued by the government. Abraham Lincoln, the greenbacks, bang. President Kennedy, the silver certificates, bang. The worst nightmare of the banking system is interest-free money, because that takes their power away at source and their control away at source. So the money system, the money should be there to serve the interests of the population, to overcome the limitations of barter. That's the great benefit and use of money. So there is a conduit that means I don't have to paint your house if you'll come and do this to mine, barter. But that there is a conduit that allows me to give energy to you and you to give energy for me for my contribution to you and your contribution to me. That's the benefit of money. Once you start charging interest on it, then money's reason for being disappears and becomes a tool of control and a tool of power. So you have this situation through the money system where you have, because of it, people with skills here, people that want those skills here, but those skills cannot be used for these people who want them because the money system stops that happening. It locks people away. It locks skills away. It locks potential away. Because if you don't got the money, you can't express that potential. And what's happened in some areas of the world, I've written about this in books long ago, is when there's been a real economic disaster, they have created a system in a community whereby they have credits, and if because there's no money for skills to be used for people that want the skills, so how do you get across that? And what these community systems have done is basically had someone centrally running the computer, and then someone wants their house painted, so the house is painted, and credits go on the painter's account, and the person who's had the house painted now has credits they have to contribute to the community for that, which relate to their skill and what they can contribute to the community. And what these systems have done is overcome the limitations of the financial system. There's no money to pay anybody, and it's basically a middle ground between straight out barter and money, and it's overcome in many instances this locking away of skills which cannot be used because there's not the money to pay for them. And it's again, we come back to how we started out. If you can control the money system, who has it and who doesn't, you completely control everything. You control choice, you control potential, you control possibility. And that's why this cult controls the money system. Indeed, if you go back historically, created it in the form that it is today. Self-respect is the state of being that has ended every single tyranny in human history. Because it's self-respect that says, no, I'm not cooperating.
I have 6 questions here, which I challenge you, should you choose to accept, to answer in 15 seconds or less.
Right, okay. Well, that's asking me to do
this might be one of your life's greatest challenges today.
I'll give it my best shot.
I know you will. Great. Is money or the love of money the root of all evil?
Now, money's not the root of all evil. Money, that's what we talked about, is a means of exchanging skills. The love of money is the root of all evil. That's what the phrase actually says, where money becomes your goal for the sake of money. And people get up with the sun every day who've got more money than they could spend in 20 lifetimes trying to get more. That is, I think that's a sickness personally. And like I say, it's about using money to control rather than using money for just to acquire more and more wealth.
Do you think you're controversial?
I hope so. If you're not controversial in a world that's utterly insane, then it's time to find a mirror and ask why. If a world that's insane doesn't see you as insane, you should find a mirror and ask why. Because when an insane world says that Ike is insane, I punch the air and say, thank you very much. Very kind of you. Because if this insane world thought I was sane, then I'd have a real problem.
If you had gun to your head, David, all of your financial holdings in cash or all of your financial holdings in crypto, which would you choose and why?
Well, where they want to go with the cryptocurrency is I'm talking about the cult, is to turn it into a one world currency, where in the end your money would be connected to your body. This is part of this whole AI infiltration of the human body and the human mind, and the synthetic changes taking place in the body thanks to these fake vaccines. They want you to actually be able to hold your money on your body. So you kind of do that, and bang, it's like putting a credit card across. So that's where they want it to go, because that's complete control. No one can do anything unless they know about it. And of course, once all money is electronic, they can wipe it out when they like. So if I had to choose between the two, I'd go for cash, even though they want to get rid of cash. And why do they want to get rid of cash? Because cash is private, whereas everything else is not. That's why they want to get rid of cash.
David, if you could choose between 1 million in cash and 1 million engaged followers, what would you choose and why?
Well, that's a bad choice, really, because I don't want followers, and anyone who is a follower of me is not listening. The idea is to show people that they don't need to follow anyone; they need to follow themselves and become their own center of constructing their perception. But what you can do is help that process by the information you put out there. So I don't want followers. £1 million or 1 million people seeing through the lies, 1 million people seeing through the lies every time. I live in a 1-bedroom flat with this tiny office, and I've lived here since 2001. I have the simplest of simple lifestyles. I'm not quite a minimalist, but I'm in that direction. not through ideological choice. It's just the way I live my life. And so the only thing I could do with £1 million is to put it into making the communication of this information more effective. But I certainly don't want it for myself. Thank you very much. I'm offered business opportunities all the time. You promote this, you promote that, and you'll get this car. And every single time, nope, nope, nope. So if anyone's watching this and thinks, well, we'll offer him a business opportunity because then he'll promote this or promote that, you're wasting your time. If I think what you are wanting to do, and I've done this a number of times, is good for getting the information out, then I'll I'll promote it. I'll give it a good mention, but I don't want any money for it. Thank you very much, and I don't want a business opportunity. I don't want anything to do with it. I just want to. I'm 69, and I know I didn't just say. I'm 69, and my life is dedicated to this. It's not dedicated to making.
David, what's your 15-second big warning to humanity?
If you don't see what's going on and refuse to cooperate with it, by very little time from now, you, your kids and grandkids are going to be living in a global fascist dictatorship of total 24-hour surveillance control. If you don't want that to happen, get off your frickin' ass.
David, I'd love to hear about your new book. I know you're a prolific author and would love to hear about it. And when you told me the title before, that definitely intrigued me.
Perceptions of a Renegade Mind, yeah. Because, well, it's a very topical book. It's very much about things happening now. But it goes deep into where it's all coming from. And it goes into the psychological manipulation that it's all founded on and how they do it. But renegade mind, what is that? Well, you can have a critically thinking mind and you can put dots together and you can see something and you can see what's happening. But a critically thinking mind that can see it, or at least some of it, won't necessarily do anything about it. It might still conform in fear of not conforming. A renegade mind will never do that. A renegade mind is a critically thinking mind, a constantly questioning mind, a not taking anything on face value mind without checking it out, especially if it comes from authority. And the added part of the renegade mind is, having seen it, it won't cooperate with it. It won't be intimidated into cooperating with tyranny, because the renegade mind has self-respect. Self-respect is the state of being that has ended every single tyranny in human history, because it's self-respect that says, no, I'm not cooperating. My self-respect won't allow it. And this is one reason, because I said earlier, it's a psychological, the whole conspiracy, not just that COVID conspiracy, but the conspiracy in general. It's all a psychological operation. And so they want your self-respect. A renegade mind will never give it to them, but they want your self-respect because they know that once your self-respect has been handed over, there's nothing left. What's left with you then is submission. That's all that's left. And this is why, in the psychological game, they put monumental morons that people can see are morons in political power. People like Biden, people like Johnson, people like Daniel Andrews in Victoria, Australia, and other leaders in Australia. Macron in France. They want you to see it. Fauci in America. And they want you to see all the contradictions in what these morons are telling you to do. They want you to see them, because if you can see that a moron is telling you to do something, and you can see that what they're telling you to do has no basis in common sense or science, but you still do it, they've got your self-respect. And all that's left is submission. And a renegade mind will never hand over its self-respect. Never. I'll die first. And I willingly die first. I'm going to die at some point anyway. Thank God I don't want to stay here forever. But it's, I'm I'm not going to concede a centimeter to these people, and they can't intimidate me because I'm unintimidatable because I'm not frightened to death. That's the renegade mind. There's a lot more to it, but that's the basis of it.
And David, where can we follow you? I'm going to be a bit cheeky
here. No, you can't follow me anywhere.
No, I know.
What you can do is look at my stuff at davidicke.com.
Where can we get more of your teachings from online?
Yeah, well, you get more of my information from. I prefer that. That's davidicke.com. That's the basic hub where there's news stories on there every day, but put into context of why they're happening, not just that they're happening. And all my videos are on there as well. And then there's Iconic, which is our media platform. It's an alternative version of Netflix in many ways. These are original iconic documentaries on not just conspiracy, that's only part of it, the whole range of nature of reality, everything you can think of that you'd call alternative, looking and exploring alternative psychology, all of it. It's all on there. And there's series, and there's I do a show there every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock where I go through the week's news and put it into context. My son Gareth does a great show on a Friday night at 7 o'clock called Right Now, which is really it is right now. It's the news of the week and the people in the news that week, looking at the world from another angle. And of course, I say it's 7 o'clock and 10 o'clock. They're on Iconic ongoing, and you get them on demand. My son Jamie put that together, and he's done a fantastic job. It's been very, very successful.
Great. So, David, thank you much for sharing your time here. It's been fascinating. Really grateful for you for doing this a second time. Really appreciate you.
Real pleasure. Thanks very much. It's been very much enjoyable.
Wow. So I really enjoyed doing that interview. That's the second time I've interviewed David Icke, and I think you'll find it very different from the last interview and most of his other interviews. But I would like to know what you thought about the interview. So let me know in the comments, what did you like? What didn't you like? What do you agree with? What do you not agree with? I would love your thoughts in the comments right now. And remember, if you want the full, unedited version that would not be able to be put on any social media channel, go to rob.team. If you enjoyed this content, go back and watch the first interview and make sure you like the video, turn on the notification bell and subscribe to the Disruptive Entrepreneur channel. And remember this, if you don't risk anything, you risk everything.